We're joined by the authors of Game Change, John Heilemann and Mark Halperin. Mark Halperin, let me begin with you. I heard, I think it was you or one of you say that you had a list of things that you thought would make news in this book, and it's been out there for a little bit now. We've heard many of the pieces in this book. What on that list hasn't made news, or what are you surprised at?
Well, a lot of things. John and I set out to write a book we thought, we hoped people would find to be an interesting book to read, an interesting story, as we say in the subtitle of the campaign, A Race of a Lifetime. But we also were going for breaking news because we thought there were things that were uncovered during the campaign. I'll give you one. John, as you said, we have a long list. John will have others. Sarah Palin was picked by John McCain. People were shocked when it happened, and at the time the McCain campaign said she'd been on the list under consideration for a long time and that she'd received as much background check of the so-called vetting as any of the other people John McCain considered. There was skepticism about that at the time, but like so much that we write about in Game Change, the kind of parade, the political journalism parade moved on. There were other things to cover, Sarah Palin's incredible speech and everything else that happened after the Republican convention. So this is one case where we went back to say, well, what was the truth? And the truth is that she was brought into the game of consideration for McCain as McCain's running mate very late, after their main focus, Joe Lieberman, fell apart as an option. They needed a game-changing pick. They were sure of that. Lieberman was a game-changing pick of one sort. Palin was another. In the book, we quote from, for the first time anywhere, the vetting report done by a young Washington lawyer who was asked on a Friday afternoon to get ready, and then in the space of less than 2 days, looked into Sarah Palin's background, not by making any phone calls or interviewing anybody, but simply doing online searches because they needed to keep it a secret. Quoting from that report, looking at the process by which McCain picked a virtual stranger as his running mate is something we thought would get a lot of attention and hasn't gotten very much.
John Heilemann.
I think, I agree with Mark. There's a ton of stuff in the book that hasn't gotten the kind of attention that we would have expected, and I'll give you three quicker examples. One of them is it's kind of a macro story, which is that, in the wake of the campaign, one of the pieces of conventional wisdom that was propounded by the Obama operation was that from the very beginning, from the time that Obama got into the race to the very end, that the question of race, his race, was something they didn't really think about, that it wasn't factored into his decision to run. They didn't talk about it internally during the campaign. That was just kind of a non-issue. That was one of the things they said over and over again after his election. And throughout the book Game Change, we talk about how much they were in fact obsessed with race as a political factor. We talk about how in the fall campaign against McCain, they produced ad after ad after ad in expectation. They internally produced fake ads that they thought were the kinds of ads the McCain campaign was going to run against them that would be racially freighted, and how would they respond to that. That it was like kind of topic A in some ways within the Obama campaign. I think that's terrifically interesting, and I'll do two more quickly.
And before you do, real quick though, let me show
Sure.
our viewers that part of the book where you talk about that. So you said, while the cash poor McCain campaign was coming up with negative ads on the fly, scribbling scripts, in effect, on the backs of napkins, airing the spots without ever testing them, the well-heeled Obamas were running a stealthy high-tech lab to discover which attacks were most dangerous and to develop responses.
Right, and I'll just stay with that just because you stayed with it. It is I think fascinating. They produced dozens upon dozens of spots, and then also to look at those ads to prepare to respond to them, and then also produced dozens of spots that would deal with the problem. The question of when would Obama's alleged connections to Muslimism, when would that become something that the McCain campaign started pushing out? Now, they didn't, and the book accurately reports that that's true, but the Obama campaign was constantly trying to respond. And we have a great anecdote in the book where they tried at one point, the Obama campaign, to produce an ad that would take care of all of the questions about his race, his alleged Muslimism, and his alleged lack of patriotism all in one ad. And we tell the story very humorously in the book that Obama, when he reads the script of this kind of ridiculous ad that was supposed to kind of knock down all of these in one, he reads the script and just says, you guys, this is too much. I can't actually say this. This is just a kind of a silly ad. I would just say two other things, and I'll say them quickly. One is we have what I think is a very, very strong chapter in the book on the economic crisis and the financial crisis, which has incredible reporting, I believe, about what happened in the White House meeting between where that George Bush held with John McCain and Barack Obama. I think it's hardly been mentioned in the coverage, and it's, I think, very, very interesting. Shows how unprepared McCain was, how well prepared Obama was. One person in the meeting, a Republican aide in the meeting, says that as he listened to Obama take over the meeting effectively, that it seemed to him that if you closed your eyes, you would have believed this was the President of the United States, not George Bush or John McCain. And then we have a very interesting story about David Geffen and Maureen Dowd, and how a devastating column that Maureen Dowd wrote in the early part of the nomination fight, how that came to be, and how this kind of mischievous dyad between this famous Hollywood mogul and this New York Times columnist, how they dealt one of the first really severe blows to the notion of Clinton's inevitability.
Let's dig into that a little bit more. Mark Halperin, on the what John was just talking about there, about Dowd's column with Geffen. There's a backstory there. She was trying to write that column before she finally got him to agree to do it.
She was, and as John said, it's an interesting case of two not only prominent people but iconic people. The most prominent New York Times columnists of our time right now, I'd say, in many ways, and then David Geffen, this incredibly influential Hollywood figure. David Geffen, part of DreamWorks with Steven Spielberg and Jeffrey Katzenberg, were big supporters of the Clintons. They'd raised a lot of money for them. David Geffen had stayed in the Lincoln bedroom. But he, like so many prominent liberals, including in Hollywood, had turned against the Clintons. He was particularly unhappy with President Clinton's choice of pardons at the end of his second term, not granting a pardon that David Geffen had lobbied for, pardoning Mark Rich, the fugitive financier. So Geffen had turned on the Clintons and felt that they were, if not actually corrupt, they were kind of morally bankrupt. He loved Obama. He saw him speak at the Democratic Convention in 2004. He reached out to him, started a relationship with him. And when Maureen Dowd heard David Geffen speak at the 92nd Street Y in New York and get a question about the Clintons and about Hillary's chances, David Geffen was very tough on Hillary Clinton. And Maureen, in the audience, was struck not just by how tough David Geffen was in his talking about the Clintons' morality, but the audience reaction. Here they are in New York, the state that Hillary Clinton represents, and the audience seemed very enthusiastic about the notion of criticism of Hillary Clinton. So over the course of a long period of time, as you suggested, Maureen is lobbying David Geffen to take what he said at that event, amplify it to her in an interview. And by coincidence, she's out in California on the night before David Geffen is going to host a major fundraiser for Barack Obama. She convinces him to do the interview.
And what year is this?
This is 2007. This is a critical period because Barack Obama has gotten in the race. He's clearly created a lot of excitement. And in communities that are vitally important if you're trying to become the Democratic nominee for president, Hollywood, New York, liberal circles, where Hillary was trying to sort of not let Obama rise up as a major competitor to her. So for David Geffen to agree to host this fundraiser, we report in the book, was a big blow to the Clintons. They were desperate to try to overshadow that because it showed that their Hollywood support, so key in the Democratic Party, would not be monolithic. And again, Maureen convinces Geffen to do the interview. The next night, her column goes on the web. Again, by coincidence, both Barack Obama and Maureen Dowd are at this fundraiser at Geffen's house. And Geffen knows the article's going to run. He prints it out and takes it over to Obama and shows it to him and says, this thing might cause some trouble. And Obama said, trouble for whom? Because it wasn't going to cause any trouble for Obama. And as it plays out, as we report in the book, it was even worse for the Clintons than they thought. This was the first time a lot of the issues of Bill Clinton's personal life, of the question of whether the Clintons were old politics, whether they were too loose with the truth, was laid out, and in the 1-2 punch of it being laid out by David Geffen, this pillar of the Hollywood establishment, via a Maureen Dowd column, was devastating in public for the Clintons, and personally behind the scenes even more devastating to them because of all it represented.
I'm going to turn this over to our viewers because I'm sure many people are eager to ask you questions and state their comments. Bluntville, Tennessee. Sylvia, Democratic line, you're first. Go ahead.
I saw you all on another show, and you were talking about that Bill and Hillary were upset during the Iowa caucuses that the Obama campaign had cheated. From what I read and what I heard was that the reason they were so upset is because the Obama campaign bussed in lots of young people from Illinois with the help of Acorn. And they showed up at the caucuses early. They took over the caucuses, and then they locked out the Hillary voters.
John Heilemann?
It is the caller is exactly right about what the Clintons believed. That is to the letter. What we report in the book is that Hillary had been worried about this possibility for a while. She had been concerned that that the caucuses were too loose, and there was some chance that because Obama was the home state senator from Illinois, that this could happen.